Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a real heavyweight. Mulla Sadra. That's the 17th century thinker who pulled together philosophy, theology, and mysticism into this incredible system called Hikmat Mutala, Transcendent Wisdom.
It's a vast landscape, absolutely. And before we even try to map it out, Sadra points us to the very bedrock. Really everything he talks about, it orbits around this one fundamental reality. Existence itself. Wujud. That's the linchpin.
The core question.
Exactly. And just before we dive in proper, it's important for us to mention something about our sources.
Right.
This deep dive draws from translations of conversations with notable Iranian philosophers like Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani. Now, because we're working across languages and with some really profound concepts, some nuances, maybe some specific details might not come through perfectly.
Yeah, translation always has its challenges, especially with philosophy this deep.
Precisely. So we just want to acknowledge that up front and, apologize if there are any small discrepancies along the way.
Understood. So with that groundwork laid, let's talk about this idea of transcendent wisdom. What pushes Sadra's thinking beyond, say, standard philosophy or theology?
I was really struck by the entry requirement he sets. Intellectual freedom, azadi andisha.
Ah, yes, azadi disha. It's not just a suggestion, it's fundamental. It's the absolute prerequisite, and it really defines the philosopher's integrity for Sadra. He draws a very sharp line between two kinds of thinkers.
Okay.
On one hand, you have the mutakallim, the theologian. Their job, essentially, is apologetics. They begin with a specific religious belief, a doctrine that's already accepted.
Right. The conclusion is set from the start.
Exactly. And then they use reason, almost like a legal brief, to defend and prove that predetermined point. Reason serves the conclusion.
Okay, so it's about justification.
It is. But then you have the hakim, the philosopher, the sage, and their approach is radically different. Their allegiance, it's purely to reason itself. They have to follow the path of logic wherever it leads.
Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it challenges everything else. Especially then. Even if it means overturning deeply held personal beliefs or traditions or established doctrines. That, for Sadra, is genuine philosophical integrity, following the thought no matter the cost.
Hold on, though. Isn't there a danger there?
Yeah.
Does that kind of freedom just become, well, anything goes, relativism?
Yeah.
How does he stop it from just being intellectual chaos?
That's the critical point. It's not license. It's actually an incredibly demanding discipline. The sources describe it as this conscious ability to temporarily bracket out everything else.
Everything.
Your prior beliefs, your ego, what you want to be true, your cultural background, even political leanings. You set it all aside just for a moment to follow pure reason.
Like putting blinders on, but in a good way, to see just the logic.
Kind of. Think of Socrates, maybe. He questioned relentlessly, that was his freedom. But his commitment to the outcome, to the truth he found, was absolute. He drank the hemlock rather than betray the process, right?
Freedom in the thought process, but commitment to where it leads.
Wow. That's the idea. Freedom in thinking requires total commitment to the consequences of that thought.
That's a serious standard of integrity. So, okay, if you achieve that kind of disciplined freedom, it clears the path to Sadra's cornerstone. Wujud, existence. The sources really emphasize this. Sadra apparently thought the biggest kind of ignorance was failing to grasp the role of wujud. Why is just being so hard to understand, harder than understanding, say, tables or chairs?
Well, because Mulla Sadra's big move, his revolution really, was to flip the script on what philosophy was even about. Before him, a lot of focus was on mahiyat.
Essence, like the definition of a thing.
Exactly. The whatness, what makes a chair, static definition. Sadra comes along and says, no wujud, existence. The sheer fact that something is, that's primary. That's fundamental.
So philosophy shifts from static definitions to what? Dynamic reality.
Precisely. It becomes about process, change, movement, the very act of existing. And that leads us straight into this fascinating paradox when you try to define this existence, this wujud.
Okay, I'm listening.
Ask yourself, can you actually define wujud? Logically, to define something, the definer needs to be separate from the thing defined, right?
Sure, you need some distance.
But if you try to define existence, well, is there anything outside of existence that could possibly do the defining?
No. I mean, what would that be? Non-existence, nothingness, that can't define anything.
Exactly. So if the only thing that could potentially define existence is existence itself, well then, Existence has to define itself. We're sort of trapped inside it.
So we can't step outside of being to talk about being.
You can't. When we speak, when we think, when we proceed, wujud is already there. It's the ground we stand on. Like Rumi said, if existence had a tongue, it would remove the veils. But we're using existence to talk about existence.
Okay, so it's utterly fundamental, but impossible to define from the outside. How did Sadra help us get a handle on it then? I understand he broke it down into like 3 aspects.
Yeah. Yes, he did. To help clarify things we often mix up. First, there's what he calls the truth of existence, aniyat al-Wujud. This is just raw, objective reality, the isness out there, independent of whether we think about it or not. It just is.
The brute fact of reality.
Right. Then second, there's the concept of existence, mafhum al-Wujud. This is the idea in our minds, the concept of is or being. And this concept, Sadra says, is actually the most self-evident concept we have.
Really? More obvious than blue or loud?
Absolutely. Think about it. Every single thought, every sentence uses or implies the concept of existence. The sky is blue, that sound is loud. The concept itself is incredibly simple and universally understood. It's the most basic mental tool we have.
Okay, got it. Truth of existence, reality, concept of existence, idea. What's the third one? Essence, mahiyat. That's where he said the focus usually lies.
That's it. Essence, or mahiyat. This is the boundary, the limit, the definition that answers what is it, the essence of human, the essence of tree, the essence of water.
The specific characteristics that make something that particular thing.
Yeah. Exactly. But here's the crucial Sadrian insight. Mashayat isn't some separate part of wujud. Existence itself doesn't have an essence separate from its own being. It just is. But we humans, because we deal with a world full of defined things, Majud, we get fixated on their boundaries, their essences, mahiyat.
And in doing so, we miss the actual existence itself.
We completely overlook the dynamic, boundless reality of wujud that makes all those things be in the first place. We see the shapes, but miss the light that reveals them.
Okay, that brings us right to that central paradox you mentioned, the one the sources highlight. Wujud is somehow both the most obvious thing and in the highest secrecy. How can that be? If the concept is so simple, why is the reality so hidden?
It seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? But Sadra explains it beautifully using the analogy of light.
Light.
Think about light. What could be clearer? Its whole nature is to illuminate, to make other things mustanir visible, manifest. Everything you perceive through light.
It's the condition for seeing anything at all.
Right, but can you actually see the light itself? I mean, the pure light separate from the object it's bouncing off.
No. You see the illuminated wall, the bright screen, the sunbeam hitting dust, but not the light itself in empty space.
Exactly. Unless it hits something, it's invisible. Wujud is precisely like that. It's so intensely present, so radically fundamental as the condition for everything we experience, that its sheer intensity, its blinding clarity, actually makes it hidden from our direct grasp.
Concealed by its own overwhelming presence. Wow.
It's too bright, too close, too obvious to be seen as a separate thing.
So if our normal way of knowing conceptual knowledge definitions, what Sadra called acquired knowledge, ilm husuli, if that focuses on limits and essences, mahiyat, how do we ever get past that to grasp this hidden light of wujud? How do we move from the concept of existence to the presence of existence?
That's the crucial shift. We have to move beyond ilm husuli, acquired knowledge, to reach what Sadra calls knowledge by presence, ilm husuri.
Okay, husuli is like book learning. Concepts in the mind.
Yeah, think of it like reading an incredibly detailed guidebook about, say, the Grand Canyon. Maps, descriptions, photos, geological data, that's all husuli. It's mediated knowledge. It relies on mental forms, concepts.
Right. Useful, but it's not the canyon itself.
Exactly. Ilm husuri is the moment you are actually standing at the rim, feeling the wind, seeing the vastness, the scale hits you directly. It's immediate, non-conceptual awareness. That's the goal for grasping wujud, because pure existence can't be captured in a concept.
Can you give another example of husuri, something we all experience?
The most fundamental one is your awareness of your own self, your own existence. You don't need a definition or a concept to know that you are. You are immediately present to your own being. That's husuri.
I don't think about existing, I just am.
Precisely. Or, another subtle example, your awareness of a concept itself. You know the concept tree directly right now. You don't need another concept to mediate your awareness of the concept tree. Your awareness of the thought itself is presential.
Ah, I see. And the moment I try to explain or define that feeling of self-awareness, that huzuri, it immediately flips back into huzli, right? It becomes just another concept.
You got it. It's like trying to
Wow.
grab smoke. The moment you analyze huzuri conceptually, it ceases to be huzuri.
Yeah.
It becomes an idea about presence, not presence itself.
So how is it reached then, if not through concepts?
Sadra talks about tanabu, a kind of awakening, vigilance, direct insight. It bypasses the usual mental machinery of definition and form. It's an immediate grasp.
Which sounds difficult, because we as knowers, we're always limited, right? Muqayyad, conditioned, finite. Our knowledge seems inherently limited too.
That's the inherent tension. Yes, we are limited, Muqayyad. But here's the philosophical connection Sadra makes. The limited cannot exist without the absolute, mutlaq. They aren't two separate things. The limit depends on the unlimited.
The boundary only makes sense because there's something beyond it.
In a way, yes. If you perform that act of intellectual freedom rigorously enough, if you mentally strip away the limitation, the condition, the qutaid,
Right.
what's left?
Yep.
The absolute, wujud in its pure, unconditioned state. And this is where, paradoxically, philosophy often has to become silent. Because the moment you try to speak about the purely absolute, you're using limited language, reintroducing boundaries.
Speech itself is a limit.
It is. And what's really powerful is how Sadra connects this endpoint of the rational journey directly to spiritual insight, specifically citing Imam Ali, the famous exchange.
Remind me.
Imam Ali was asked, "Do you worship a Lord you have not seen?" A challenging question.
Extremely.
And his answer was stunningly direct. "I would not worship one I did not see."
Whoa. How do you explain that, given the impossibility of physically seeing the absolute?
He clarified immediately, bridging that gap. Eyes do not see him with direct vision, so not physical sight, but hearts perceive him through the reality of faith.
Iman.
Perception through the heart, the reality of faith. Yes. And for Sadra, this iman, this deep inner certainty of the heart, is the philosophical equivalent of huzur. It is knowledge by presence. It's where the most rigorous rational inquiry finds its culmination in direct, unmediated certainty.
So the journey Sadra lays out, it starts with this demanding intellectual honesty, this freedom, that it pushes us past focusing just on things, mawjud, and their definitions, mahiyat, to confronting existence, wujud, itself, this blindingly obvious yet hidden reality. And the way to grasp it isn't through more concepts, but through this immediate knowledge by presence, huzuri.
You've traced the path perfectly. It's a movement from the conceptual to the presential, grounded in intellectual integrity and culminating in a certainty that transcends mere definition.
And that brings us to a really provocative final thought, drawing on that contrast you mentioned earlier.
Right. Think about Prophet Moses on Mount Sinai. His plea was, "Arani, show me." He sought a kind of visible manifestation.
And the answer?
The famous response was, "Lantarani, you will never see me." A refusal, at least in that direct visual sense.
Okay.
But then contrast that with Imam Ali, who declared he only served a God he saw, not with the eyes, but with the heart, with iman, with shuzur.
So one sought external visual proof, the other affirmed an internal immediate certainty.
Exactly. So that leaves us, and you listening, with a question to ponder. What's the difference between seeking that kind of external, maybe even physical evidence, which is always mediated by our senses and concepts, versus cultivating that inner immediate certainty, that presence?
In your own search for understanding life's big questions, which path are you leaning on more? Are you looking for the external showing, or are you trying to develop that internal seeing, that presence Mulla Sadra points towards?
Something to reflect on. Which kind of knowing feels more fundamental to you, the mediated or the immediate?